show that's all about basically whatever it takes to make a movie TV show. Entertainment stuff. That's all about it here. Nobody gets left behind. This is episode number 31. And I am one of the beautiful hosts, Josh, joined, as always, by the guy that has never found a hat he didn't like, Brandon.
What is up, everybody? Happy Monday.
I don't think that's how.
It's my Monday. It's my Monday at work. It's my Monday. So happy Friday to the rest of you saps that have off on the weekends that I hate with a passion. I'm joking. I do love you guys, but yeah, well, you know what? Like I said, I'm joking. I love you guys. I'm actually just very jealous. That's all.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, like what's on the lineup for tonight, Josh? What do we got going on?
Tonight, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people tend to overlook when it comes to where their movies and TV shows come from. That is, of course, adaptions. Everyone talks about remakes, reboots, and why aren't there original stories being told without even stopping to think that, hey, that quote-unquote original movie you're thinking about, it probably came from somewhere, right? So tonight we're going to be talking about the adaptions and the process and, just everything that entails moving from one medium to another.
Yep. And there's quite a few movies that were successfully adapted. And then there are movies that just, weren't. Like, I'm not going to say anything, but, John Carter.
Yeah, can't blame them, though, because John Carter was worth a shot.
Yeah, it really was.
Because it's a public domain thing, everybody and anybody could adapt it to whatever they want. I just wish they would have put maybe some effort into it.
Oh, yeah. No, that would have been nice, but nope.
So let's ask the first obvious question, which is, why adapt something?
Well, I mean, honestly, like if you have, what do you call it? If you have a source, like a material that you can adapt into, a decent, like a really good story. Mm-hmm. If it's possible to adapt it and not make some horrible movie. Like, if it's a good story, I think that you should adapt it. Like, I think if it's a story that has not been touched upon, go for it. Now, if it's just like a fresh twist on an old story, like have you seen the remake or the modernized telling, I think they called it, of Pet Sematary?
No, I generally don't.
It was shameful, man. It was so bad. Because in the novel and even in like the movie from the 90s, it's the boy, it's Gage. He's the one that dies. In this one, it's the daughter that dies. And she dies like fairly early on. Like she dies almost immediately, as would like the son. But it was god awful. It was like the movie was nothing but attempted jump scare after attempted jump scare.
So it tried to take for I think a fair term, a classic story, right? And put in it the modern stylings of horror, which is essentially a lot of jump scares. That seems to be what scares people these days. And I mean, you and I, we're roughly, well, yeah, we are the same age since you just had your birthday.
Yep.
And we grew up with horror that was it was built a lot around atmosphere. You were scared before anything ever happened. Why? Because the mood was set.
Well, yeah. If you look at like The Exorcist 3, I think it's The Exorcist 3, where there's this scene in a hospital. It is just a long, drawn out scene, and it's boring. It just looks like a nurse in the hospital doing her usual thing, and you don't expect anything of it. She's just checking, doing her paperwork, filing paperwork, and there's really nothing threatening about it. Um, and then out of nowhere, she is followed out of a room by someone with shears. And the very next scene is pretty much, it just cuts to a statue without a head. Like it tells you right there what happened, but like the way it built it up and like it was just this really eerie kind of, something ominous is about to happen. Um, but it's just like I don't even know how to describe it, but you have these other these movies that are based around books where they could do something great with it,
Yeah.
and it's just something happens where they decide like, okay, well, we did enough. Like, well, let's like improve this. Jurassic Park. You and I talked about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Jurassic Park is a good example of what you know. I guess what can happen if you have a like I guess like things that you alter in the novel. Like there's this long like first off, Jurassic Park, even The Lost World, two great novels by Michael Crichton.
Mm-hmm.
Jurassic Park, they take out this whole river chase scene where where they're evading dinosaurs while floating down a river. That was taken out of the movie. Excuse me, but they put it into Jurassic Park 3. I mean, it changed quite a bit, but they put it into Jurassic Park 3. The Lost World, the whole I think it was it San Diego where they were chasing down the T-Rex?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that never happened in the novel. Like I mean, in the novel, they never left the island. It takes nothing happens. Um, in what do you call it in the Lost World where they're in San Diego. Ian Malcolm dies, succumbs to his wounds, I believe, in the first novel.
And John Hammond dies.
And John Hammond dies, and John Hammond is like, he's like just a maniacal like prick. Like he wasn't even really concerned for his kid's safety in the novel, his grandkid's safety. Like he didn't care. So I mean, there's things that they improved in the movie. Um, First off, Jeff Goldblum, he's a national treasure. You can't kill him off.
Right.
Like I mean, then in the Lost World, God, it's been so long since I read that book. But in the Lost World, like it goes into detail. I think it's Dawson, if I remember right. I believe Dawson from the first movie is the antagonist in the Lost World in the novelization.
God, it's been like 25 years since I've read it.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and reread it. But it's like there was so many things that they changed, and The Lost World wasn't a horrible movie. It was far from faithful to the source material, but it wasn't a horrible movie. By no means was it anywhere near as good as the first one. But like pretty much like The Lost World, what you got in the movie was more T-Rex. Like I mean, it shouldn't even been called The Lost World. It should have just been like T-Rex's Day Out.
Yeah. There was certainly a whole lot of Rex in
Oh yeah,
the Lost World.
Yeah, like nonstop. Like, oh yeah, here's a T-Rex. Like,
but
enjoy.
In the sense of the movie version of the universe that was set, it made sense. They took the title of the sequel and made essentially a Jurassic Park 2, but they essentially dropped almost everything, that made the sequel, the novel sequel, um, a sequel to the first book.
Yeah, and
And
it's
I
like,
think, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was going to finish your thought.
Well, I was going to say, I think that goes back to the why adapt something. And in an ideal world, in a perfect situation, you're seeing creators in whatever medium that they're choosing to adapt something to, and they're doing it for a love of the source material. I mean, you could easily tell Steven Spielberg had an affinity for the novel, and it came through on the screen. Sure, he changed some things he had to do for that very specific rating that he was going for, as well as budget wise. But I mean, at the end of the day, he was trying to make a movie about a story that he liked, as well as make it for a wide audience. That's why you don't have people getting gutted like there was in the book. Nedry met a very, very, very bad fate.
Oh yeah. Well, he was ripped. Like, I mean, it got graphic with the description of how he was killed in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you see that in quite a few of the novels. I mean, you see, oh God, I forget. I want to say it was Dodgson. I want to say he was the bad guy in the what do you call it? In the novelization. Again, like you said, it's been a long time, man. But the way he died at the hands of not just a T-Rex baby, but by a few of them. Um, dude, it's like it was just straight up nightmare fuel. Like, I mean, God, it was just absolutely like, I mean, it was hard to. I was a kid when I read it. I was like, I think, God, 13, 14, maybe when I read that book.
Yeah, I was about the same age.
Like, damn, yeah, they did that man wrong. Like, but
Another good case of things that have come to life, even though it does have kind of a mixture of the love of the source material, plus the added advantage of a hot item cash grab, is the Harry Potter series.
oh yeah, well, see, that's a franchise I can't really discuss too much about Harry Potter because I never read a single book.
Oh, I read all.
Oh,
Funny
you were a
story.
Harry Potter freak, weren't you?
No, no, not
You're a
well.
grown ass Harry Potter freak. You're like an 18-year-old guy. Like, yeah, gotta
Not
get me some of that Harry Potter.
not at all. Let me tell you about my Harry Potter experience. I worked at a kiosk in the mall, and we sold a lot of Harry Potter stuff. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. It's kids' books. What is with all these grown people, getting so deep into this kids' book? It's kind of weird. And
Yeah.
then I went to basic training. And when I was in basic training, I got hurt. And one of the few things that you're allowed to do when you're hurt is, read books. So there I am, believe it or not, as I was many, many pounds lighter, in the weight room, and one of my buddies, whom we bonded over a love of the band Lucky Boys Confusion, because he's from Chicago, and he's like, "How have you heard of these guys?" That's a different that's a different story altogether. But I'm lifting weights, and talking about books, and he's like, "Dude, have you read Harry Potter?" I'm like, "What? Are you being serious right now?" And he was like, "Yeah, you gotta read it, man."
Yeah, these are
And
things that normal grown ass men say to each other in the gym while working out.
yeah, and it
Was
totally blew
was
my
there
mind.
was there a lot of eye contact?
As a matter of fact, yes.
I'm just joking. Just joking. I'm just joking. I'm joking. Go ahead.
So, since this guy of all people, came up to me and said, "You should check it out." He handed me the first book, and it was it's not like an army barracks is a full library by any means, but we had like the 4 Harry Potter books that were released at the time, and might have been more. I don't remember, but I read it, and I was like, okay, I get, this world building. It's actually pretty good. So I read the next one, then I read the next one, and essentially, by the time I got out, I'd been caught up, and the only 2 that, let's see, the only one that I bought, close to its actual release was the last one. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm invested. I want to read more about these characters. So when, everything happened with the movies, I was like, Chris Columbus is doing this? That's a get right there. Chris Columbus is amazing. And then as the series moved on, they did what the big books did and got more... I don't want to say more mature directors, but definitely directors with a darker side to help tell the darker stories, which is, I think, exactly what you want to do in a situation like adapting, books that have a pretty massive tonal shift from book to book. And again, I think that comes from finding directors and maintaining a cast and really demonstrating a love for the source material. And it helps, when you have the creator on board to, kind of sign off on a lot of the changes that had to be made. There's definitely not enough time in the show to go over all the changes between the books and in the movies when it comes to Harry Potter, especially since, we're talking about adaptions at large. But the changes that were made a lot of sense for the new medium they were adapting it into. Now, I keep hearing, people tossing around ideas of Harry Potter is going to be remade into a Netflix series or something like that, and each season is going to be based on a year that Harry's at Hogwarts. And I say, you know what? I mean, it would probably be very good, no doubt, but isn't necessary. I thought that the changes made for the films were very apt and very appropriate. So I had 0 complaints. I don't need, more gratuitous scenes of, kids drinking butterbeer and whatever. There was a lot of extraneous material in their Harry Potter books, and I'll be honest, I'm not a bit confession time. I'm not a big Tolkien fan. I read Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit. And when Peter Jackson said he was going to be doing The Hobbit as a trilogy, I was like, wait. The 3 Rings movies I get. Because it's 3 books, thick books, and it deserves to have the full story told. Not a big fan, but I understood. The Hobbit, it's like half the size of one Lord of the Rings book, and you're trying to spread it across 3 movies, which is kind of the other side of what I've been saying, where it feels like someone somewhere greenlit this project and said, we could get more out of this if you make 3 movies instead of just the 1. It just feels dirty with money. Am I making any sense at all?
I'm trying to follow you on this one.
Well, essentially, what I'm saying is Harry Potter seemed to be made for the love of the material. Lord of the Rings seemed to be made for the love of the material. The Hobbit seemed to, Peter Jackson loves the material, but it seems like a studio said, you got to make this 3 movies because anything associated with Lord of the Rings has to be a trilogy, and we need to cash in fast.
Okay, I got you.
And I think, in my opinion, that really soils what a good adaptation can do. More so than any changes to characters made or any changes in story. Just the fact that something can come across, especially when it has a fan base, but when something can come across as a cash grab of any sort, it really taints the idea that you're getting a loving adaptation of a well-regarded material. I had an interaction with your significant other a few weeks ago.
Who's that?
How many significant others do you have?
Well, it depends on who's listening. I'm joking. Listen, it's not like she ever listens to our show anyways, so the hell with her. But what about her?
Well, we were talking about...
We're in love.
I say talking about loosely. It was Facebook comments. And I mentioned that I'm still waiting for a Maniac McGee adaptation. And she pointed me in the direction of, like, one that was made for Nickelodeon. And I looked at the trailer and I was like, no, this is not it. And she was like, yeah, it really sucks. Like, I really want a Maniac McGee adaptation done with some justice. Put Christopher Columbus on that. Let him rock it out. It's about a kid. It could be really awesome. But I digress. Going back to the original question, why adapt something ideally for love? Cynically, to cash in on a property. And there are, like I said, the Harry Potter Lord of the Rings instances where you can do both.
Okay.
But I think the question that I'm going to ask you, and hopefully you'll have something, an opinion, is what do you think a screenwriter looks at when he's looking at a novel to move it from one medium to another? Because naturally you can't throw in everything from a nice thick novel. You have to omit things. What do you think goes through a writer's mind as they're trying to figure out what to include and what to omit?
Well, I think, like, mind you, there's a lot of things in novels that just don't work well when brought to the screen. You see, like, okay, screenplays, and for those of you listening that don't know the difference, a novel and a screenplay are two completely different beasts. A novel goes into, like, the character's inner thoughts, inner demons, and everything else, and not just one but multiple. Excuse me. A screenplay is very much, this is what we're looking at. This is what this person says. I can't write a screenplay and say X character is deep in thought, reminiscing on days gone by years ago. Like, I mean, you don't write what they're thinking about. Michael 41, insert description here, sits by himself at a table. So he sips on his beer as he stares off into the distant other side of the bar. Like, I mean, that right there should show that he's in thought. And then you either do, like, if you want to be cheap and be a lazy writer, go into a flashback to show us exactly what he's thinking about, or just show him distracted. He's deep in thought. You don't need to tell everything. So, like, with novels, but you have things like that. Like, you can't really discuss, like, the inner turmoil. You can't display that in a movie. It has to be discussed. It has to be shown, but it has to be shown in a way that makes sense for the story. Um, but like, I mean, there's some things that just don't really mean anything to the actual plot in, I guess, an acted format. I mean, it's like there's okay, there was this book that I worked on with this writer Steve Lestat. I didn't work on the book. I worked on adapting it into an actual screenplay. And like pretty much like I think it was like a half hour sitcom pilot or something like that. Um, the book is amazing. It's just full of short little stories of his experiences being a homeless person, living in like Berkeley in the Berkeley area. But with him, he's there's so many things that just wouldn't really work well, if that makes any sense at all. It wouldn't work well on screen. Like it's just not really visually appealing. Where things take place, like I mean, even like characters. If you can't make a character work in a certain way, you can always change up the character. There are things that are adapted constantly. You have to humanize the characters too. See, like novel, there you don't read them as humans a lot of time. They're just characters. That's it. You can make them into whatever you want them to be. When these characters hit the screen, they are being acted out. That is where they're actually given a life. The boys. I forget the character's name, but it was played by Elizabeth Shue in the first season. That is an adaptation of a male character in the series. Um, there was no romance between Homelander and this character, but this character wasn't even remotely afraid of Homelander. And in the graphic novels, Homelander is infuriated um, by the fact that this guy basically owns him. Just like tells him flat out that like you do not scare me. There's nothing about you that remotely scares me. Homelander even shows up at the guy's house, threatening to kill him, and the guy just squares off with him. This guy has no powers. He is a heartless person. He has no soul, no emotions, no feelings, no nothing. He only cares about the company. Elizabeth Shue played this character as a female character and gave this character emotion and even fear towards Homelander, and it played so well in the first season. If they like, I mean, it takes on like again, it takes on a life of its own, and they really they bring it to a different level. The whole point of adaptation is to adapt it and to give it its own life, give it its own feats. Um, what book was I reading that was so different from the movie? Well, hell, I'll even say this. Danielle dragged me out to go see Little Women late last year. I had zero interest because I read the book. I saw the movies. The movies, for the most part, are just straightforward adaptations of the book. This newest version is its own adaptation. If you read the book and see the movie, they're similar, but they're different. It's more like I don't want to say modernized, but there's just like subtle changes that I have to rewatch the movie to remember. But it was a fresh breath of air. But yeah, like really like settings, characters, tone, anything that can actually make the movie more, I guess, really make it more interesting. Those are the things that you want to do. Like things that don't really add to the plot, or like little backstories or subplots in the book that don't really mean anything towards the main story itself. Those things to me are all sacrificial. That was a very long-winded answer. What do you got?
Well, I think you pretty much nailed it there when it comes to what to remove. You basically have to decide because books mostly have multiple perspectives, and you don't really see a lot of one singular vision. You get to know a character's innermost thoughts through thought processes, like you said, rather than dialogue. And going back to that example you said, guy sitting at the bar staring off into space. You know what? In the book, yeah, you see exactly what he's thinking. In a film medium, you got to cheat a little bit. Maybe there's a picture, maybe there's a flashback, something that will let you know what's going on in this guy's head. But as far as trying to figure out what to take out and what to keep, and you know what, even what to add, because there are a lot of examples where the studio will take a story in a completely different direction than what the original author intended. In fact, that was the source of a lot of the friction when it came to the adaptation of Forrest Gump.
I actually never read the book.
Oh yeah. It's crazy what happens in the book. Forrest Gump's kind of a dick. He goes into space. He becomes best friends with a monkey. He becomes a movie star. A whole lot of stuff going on in there, and the real funny thing is, some people have been made aware of the sequel to Forrest Gump. Yes, there's a sequel to Forrest Gump. There's a second novel by Winston Groom. And in the sequel, basically, from what I've read, he just wanted to make sure that they could not adapt the sequel in the same way that they adapted the original book, because he hated what they did. I think more specifically, they hated Winston Groom hated the fact that the studio told him the movie didn't make any money.
Yeah, I read about that. That was actually pretty. That was pretty dirty.
Yeah, he was.
When in fact they made a shit ton of money.
He was in line to make a tidy profit from the percentage that he was supposed to get. Very, very good, considering it was won a bunch of Oscars and became almost instantly ingrained into the psyche of America. And to this day, people of all ages know what you mean when you say things like "Jenny" and "Run, Forrest, run." It's just a part of Americana now.
Yep.
But here's the thing when it comes to movie studios. Movie studios release a lot of movies during the year, for the most part. Big studios, anyway. And, they have their tentpole, big budget movies that basically fund everything else. And they can say that their big budget movie didn't make any money because they're using it to cover the costs of the bombs, of the things that did not make any money.
Yeah. And
that naturally irritates people that are relying on a percentage of that, of the budget, or of the box office and whatnot. I can't really get too deep into that kind of thing because I'm not a well-versed guy when it comes to contracts, but I do have cursory knowledge, of these kinds of things, to interviews and reports and things like that. So, yeah, he was very upset about the adaptation as well as the money involved, and that's unfortunate. Now, when it comes to looking at very specific stories. Some stories have been told over and over again. Romeo and Juliet is one that has literally a timeless tale. As far as that's concerned, it's been done so many times in every considerable fashion you can imagine. If you recall, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet from the 90s, making it at the time, contemporary take with guns and cars and Leonardo DiCaprio. Who was it? Claire Danes?
Yep.
By the way, John Leguizamo, perfection. They updated the story in a way that, again, made it a contemporary setting, but they kept the original dialogue. They kept the original language of Shakespeare, while other more contemporary tellings of it, just off the top of my head, Romeo and Juliet. That counts.
Oh God, that shouldn't.
Yes. Yes, that. It takes everything and just puts its own spin on it. Puts its own twist on it to make it about lawn gnomes, and it's still viable-ish.
I was going to say there's that's a loaded word to use to describe it.
Yeah, but it's these things that you see done over and over again. It's almost like, I'm going to say it's exactly like this. There are certain stories where every generation has its quintessential telling of some classic stories. Everybody does. I know when it comes to these things, people say remake, reboot, reboot. I prefer in these situations to see new adaptions, because they're not taking, from previous film iterations. Maybe they lift a few things here and there, like what was the one they show in school? Was it like 1963 Romeo and Juliet?
Oh yeah, yes. And I remember that because I was about 13 years old looking at some booby.
Right, you never forget.
I never. No, there are things that stick around with teenage boys. I'm like, oh yeah, did you see Romeo and Juliet? It's like, is that the one with the booby? And now looking back, I'm 38 years old, and it's creepy because at the time that actress was only 16 years old doing that. So it's not exactly as pleasurable now as it was when I was 13. Now it's like I look at this and I realize how I'm getting it, because I'm like, oh my God, girl, put some clothes on. What the hell is wrong with you? Dad's got to be ashamed of you.
Well, it was the 60s. Things were weird in the 60s.
Like, now I understand why her dad hates Romeo so much.
See, yeah, God. I get it now too, because
damn Montagues.
The thing is, everybody remembers that scene.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
Very soft lit, in the sheets kind of deal.
That's so creepy. Yeah,
and
no.
A lot of other adaptions kind of use an iteration of that. It's not by any means like a shot for shot redoing the scene, but they take the idea of the scene, the way that it was shot, and do their own little thing with it. So yeah, some things carry through, but I still say that we just get new versions of the source material, not remaking some previous film.
Yeah, and but that's the thing. Like, as you said about the Hobbit, as Danielle commented on, I don't think she's in the actual chat. I don't know if she is or not, but she commented on a link that I shared for the chat, where she's talking about like the Hobbit just being a cash grab. Honestly, like all both trilogies were nothing but cash grabs. It was a big studio decision. There was so many things like the Battle of the Five Armies. I remember reading the Hobbit series. There was no Battle of the Five Armies. It ended. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the series ended after the death of Smaug.
Yeah, I have no idea. If
Like,
somebody in the chat can answer that, I can't.
but but no, it's like there are movies that have like subtle differences. Like okay, like well, look at Steven. Like I brought up Pet Cemetery earlier. Okay, now if you go back, the biggest Stanley Kubrick did The Shining. The book was just I don't know. It's Stephen King has a way of writing out his stories, and his book was roughly, I think, close to like 500 pages. It's been a while since I read it, but I remember it being about like 500 pages. Nowhere near like what it was, where it was like over 1,000 pages. But it was like 500 pages, and he kind of like explores more of a harrowing world of like psychic turmoil mixed with like childhood trauma. That's like pretty much what the book explores. Um, Pretty much he goes into very specific detail, even with minor characters. And he carries on with, and this is what I was going back about earlier with like subplots, right? He goes into like very, 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 very specific details with even the most irrelevant subplots. And the book was actually it was tedious for me to read this book. I love the book, but you have to like really want to get to the end of the book. A lot of people I know never even read the whole thing because they're like, I can't read anymore. It's just like this. He's. It's like me trying to explain something to Danielle. I just go on for a while. I just go on a rant until I finally get to my points. That right there is The Shining. It's like a long rant of a novel that finally gets to the point. Um, but Stephen King hates what Stanley Kubrick did with his. I remember reading about this. Like he absolutely hates the movie The Shining. Hates it. Um, but it's pretty much like what he did was Kubrick created like this. He had this menacing creation of like an oppressive spectral atmosphere in the movie. Um, and it like just if you look at like the history of horror films, it is unparalleled. I mean, it's got no competition. I would actually say that The Shining is almost as close to a perfect movie as you can get. Um, but the difference is that like Stephen King gives a lot more depth to Jack and Danny, like the father and son, than what we're given in the movie. The movie, the novel is so filled out and developed. Um, and Stephen King hated the movie for simplifying the story into something that was more visually complex and emotionally. Even the end is different. Like in the book, Jack is ultimately he's defeated by the Overlook's Topiary. In the movie, he freezes to death. Um, Pretty much, it comes down to like the novel with the haunting atmosphere and everything else. It kind of leaves you questioning like, is it meant to be taken at face value, or is it like a metaphor for like internal struggle? Um, I'll still look at the movie as being better than the novel, and no matter how much Stephen King hated the film, uh, the movie really does handle the source material better than Stephen King could do. Like, Stanley Kubrick actually took The Shining and made it better, which is rare. It's absolutely rare. Um, I don't know, like what's a movie that you've watched this where you've also read the novel, and what are the things? Do you think it's better or do you think it's worse?
Um, well, if you want to go on this continued Stephen King road, there's
Oh,
one
and
man.
one more thing I've got to say. One more thing I've got to say. You
Okay.
know how movies with incompleted scripts or scripts are always changing, usually just like bomb. They're like the worst. The worst thing you can do on a movie set is while
Super
filming,
Mario
like, oh,
Brothers.
I've got to
Excuse me.
rewrite this, huh?
I said Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Danielle loves that movie, but the thing is that's a good example because I mean, like they made this whole dystopian, Blade Runner kind of atmosphere, and it wasn't what was pitched to the studio, and they were constantly rewriting shit to where, like, I think Bob Hoskins even said, "Why bother even learning?" No, not Bob Hoskins. Oh God, what was his name? I can't. It's on the tip of my tongue. He played Koopa.
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper. That's it. Dennis Hopper. He didn't even learn his lines. And someone asked him, was like, well, why don't you know your lines? It's like, why bother? They're going to change later on anyway. Like, but you had these movies that they change the scripts on the fly on set. Stanley Kubrick, there's even footage of him doing it where he's sitting down and, like sitting down on set with his typewriter out, writing out a page. Like he's a famous like anal retentive prick of a director, but very, very precise with what he wants. And even the scene with like Shelley Duvall like swinging the bat, like walking backwards up the stairs to Jack Nicholson. Um, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was like 90 some odd takes of that. Um, but it's just like, he was constantly rewriting the script on set. And even with him doing that, what he cranked out just dwarfs the novel in any form of sincerity or, I guess, like memory, really. But go ahead. What were you going to say? You said what we were saying on the Stephen King thing.
Yeah, when it comes to adaptation, Stephen King having a very long and very illustrious career. By the way, I'm just going to add that I think one of the key points of Stephen King as a writer is the fact that every book he writes feels like a period piece because it captures the era that it represents so well. Even it's very difficult to capture the era you're living in, and it seems that he does it almost effortlessly. So that's why his books definitely need directors and screenwriters that can hone in on that and help the world come to life. I think one director in particular has not only done it once but done it twice, and that's Frank Darabont.
What's the name? Why does that name sound familiar?
Well, more recently, Frank Darabont was at least I'm. It's not like I follow follow the guy or anything, but he was very much responsible for getting The Walking Dead off the ground, directing the pilot, and if I'm not mistaken, just being the showrunner for the first couple of years before he was let go. But as far as Stephen King's concerned, he directed two Stephen King adaptations. The first being The Green Mile,
Okay.
a just wonderful, wonderful film that changed a lot about the actual original many novels that were released as a series. And you know what? I was okay with it. I was a big fan of the books as they came out. My dad worked at a not a publisher, but a distribution center that supplied books to grocery stores and things like that.
Yeah.
So growing up, I had basically my pick of comic books and novels to get for free, and I took advantage of that, and I was able to get each of the books as they came out, and it was amazing. And I loved the books so much. The fact that they threw out basically everything when it comes to, I guess, what would be called the present day version of the characters as he's telling the story, and the movie went more of a, look back, not really showing the parallels of his life as an old man versus his life as, working in the prison. And for the fact that, to turn these 6 little books into a movie, it made sense to leave some of this stuff out. It just wasn't necessary. It was an added depth for the book, and that was fine. But he's also known for taking a short story and turning it into one of the most beloved films of all time, and many say the greatest film of all time, Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah.
He to take a short story and turn it into Shawshank. It breathes new life into this material and makes it timeless. I'll be honest. I read, of course, the short story. Again, having a lot of access to reading material due to what my dad did for a living. It was excellent. It was great. It was like the best time ever. So I had no shortage of books. So I read a lot. And as I see a lot of these things that I grew to love and I mean really hold in my heart as great works of art, I did not foresee Shawshank Redemption of all things being the movie where I'm like, wow, this could be my greatest my favorite Stephen King story ever, and it's not even a Stephen King story anymore because it was remade, reborn, so to speak, and I love it. I absolutely love it. But let me backpedal on myself a little bit. It is not my favorite Stephen King creation. The Stand is my favorite Stephen King creation. Unfortunately, the only version we ever got adapted was made for TV, and don't get me wrong, the cast was great. Gary Sinise really rocked it as Stu. It was just made for TV, so it didn't have everything I was looking for. And when you talked about Stephen King and you mentioned The Shining, where it's a lot of you got to get through it to get to the good stuff. I started reading The Stand like 6 times, and it wasn't until like the 6th or 7th time that I got past chapter 3, because that last time I was like, look, I'm gonna get through it. I'm gonna do it. And when I finally got to that apex, and I could see that things were about to pick up, it became one of my quickest reads ever, because I couldn't put it down after the momentum finally got rolling. And I would hope that with whatever they're planning on doing with The Stand, that whatever adaptation they're doing, I know they're working on one. I just hope that they understand that, yes, it is kind of a slog to get through introducing everybody, but it's important to introduce everybody because there are a lot of different characters from a lot of different backgrounds, and at the very least, we know that it's possible to do it these days. There are studios that are allowing their directors, their screenwriters, they're allowing them the space they need to do things in what I think is the proper way. And hopefully, whatever they're doing, I think it's a new miniseries.
I think so. I haven't
Um,
really.
and I want to say it's going to be on CBS, not the channel, but the app.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
So it'll be allowed to do all the swearing and everything. But I hope that they get the leeway to spend a few episodes really introducing the characters in the way they should be, rather than jumping directly into virus. Everybody's dead, and now everybody's heading towards some other Abigail.
Yeah.
It needs to be spaced. I need to care about the people, and there is just so much material there, so many characters, and they're all important. Everybody has a different job, so it becomes important to tell the story correctly. And at least in this time, in this era, we're seeing a lot less, rush jobs. Okay, that might be an exaggeration, but we're definitely seeing better adaptations that are more true to source material than ever before. But this makes me want to move on to this point, which is Douglas Adams.
Okay.
You familiar with Douglas Adams?
Vaguely.
He wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's probably his most,
No, I know.
noteworthy.
No, I know he wrote that. I know he's written other stuff that I've not read.
What to say about Douglas Adams? Okay, he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was not a book. It was a radio play. And that radio play got turned into a book, which got turned into a TV series, which got turned into a movie, which is about to be turned into another miniseries. Or maybe a full series. Either way. But the thing about Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide is every time it was turned into something else, the story changed. It was very deliberate. Because he said, well, it's a different thing, so you're going to tell a different story. And, excuse me, what a lot of folks can't seem to grasp, especially online, internet peoples, and we see it a lot, especially with like comic book movies. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, Brandon, but I'm about to step up for something you like and I don't. The Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman stuff.
Okay.
And it's a lesson that I could probably learn as well. All right, pay attention, kids. When something's adapted, it becomes an entirely new thing. It doesn't matter if it's The Shining. It doesn't matter if it's Man of Steel. It doesn't matter if it's Avengers. It may share a title with the source material, but that does not guarantee that it is going to be an exact copy in any way, shape, or form. The characters are there, sure. And you know what? Sometimes they aren't. But the simple fact of the matter is, it becomes an entirely new story based on something. To put it in like Flash terms, you're going into an alternate dimension. You're in a different universe. So if something is completely different, like Age of Ultron, that wasn't what Age of Ultron was about in the comic books. That's not even remotely what it's about. But by the time Age of Ultron rolled out in the comic books, you had a long time to establish characters and build up a team. And at this point, you didn't even have Vision yet. So yeah, things were going to be different. And they changed things because they needed to use what they had available. It doesn't mean that it's a bad adaptation. Just because something is different than the source material doesn't make it bad. And one of my biggest problems with Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, leaving, the plot points behind, the biggest argument has always been, well, that's not how Batman acts. He doesn't kill. Or that's not how Superman acts. He's a Boy Scout. But keeping this in mind, what I just said, it's a different thing.
Batman kills a lot, though. He does.
Yeah. In the movies, Batman kills all the time.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying, but it's like on the movies, people are like, pissed off because Batman doesn't kill. Like, well, I mean, I beg to fucking differ. Like he like Michael Keaton killed, like, man, like he straps dynamite to a big fat guy's chest and throws him down a sewer grate. I mean, he kills. But
you are not going to hear me argue against that.
And he even smiles at him before he does it. Like he's sick.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Sorry.
Okay, I remember now. Different than what you're used to, or different than what you're expecting, is not necessarily an automatic reason to say it's bad.
Yes.
Batman killed people. Guess what? It's not your comic book Batman. Superman was dark. Guess what? It's not your comic book Superman. These are very specific movie versions of these characters. And as we've learned throughout the course of the show tonight, when you make the decision to adapt something from the source material, there are a lot of choices that have to be made.
Well, you see, another big one that people don't really think about also. Christ, look at, what do you call it?
Christ?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of. I'm not going to go there because I'm going to piss off a lot of people. I'm going to go there. The thing is that, like, I mean, first off, I maintain my philosophy that I think Jesus would be absolutely flabbergasted that we use the form of his death as a way of worshiping him. Like, that poor guy is going to come back. That poor guy is going to come back to Earth for his second coming, and he is just going to be absolutely appalled that, like, I mean, he's going to have, like, some Vietnam era style flashbacks here.
He's like, why would you do that? Why would
like,
you do that?
He's going to show up and he's going to start screaming and, like, cowering down, fetal position, rocking back and forth. He is going to do the rocking back and forth in a fetal position as if he's like a girl that just got stood up for fucking prom while he's crying himself, like saying, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, why have you forsaken me?" Which I think he actually says in the Bible. But the thing is still, he's going to say it again.
Why have you forsaken me again?
I did the best I could. He's things are going to happen.
What did you do to these people?
God, I'm so going to hell.
I'll see you there.
But no, what I was going to say is like The Walking Dead. If you've ever read The Walking Dead, Rick Grimes gets his hand chopped off, and he has a hook. Daryl Dixon does not exist. What's her name? Was it Lori? I think the blonde chick that has a thing going with the governor, and she ends up getting bit, and she shoots and kills herself or something like that.
I have no idea. I haven't watched it in years.
She lived for a long time. I think she might still be alive. Rick Grimes is still alive in the graphic novel. I mean, Carl is still alive. Old man Carl is a thing. So it's just like it's one of those deals where a lot of things have changed for the sake of telling the story. Also, like another thing they have, like even with those with the series, these actors get burnt out by doing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you have to take that into account. Um, you only have actors for as long as they really care to play those, characters. So I mean, like I mean, what was it? As much as you may like someone like people, Ben Affleck has a very very mixed fan following.
I love
Uh,
him personally.
I think he is the definitive um, Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I will catch a lot of bullshit for that, but I
I
think he is.
concur. It is now a show philosophy.
But Ben Affleck kind of nailed the character. Now, yes, I could have gone without seeing his mommy and daddy die multiple times over and over and over and over and over and over and over. We've seen it. That's one thing I loved about Spider-Man: Homecoming, um, and also Avengers Civil War, Captain America Civil War, which was basically Avengers Civil War,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still, uh, it didn't dive into Peter Parker losing Uncle Ben. It didn't go into it. Like you didn't have to see it again. Like like, oh yeah, Uncle Ben dies. Yeah, we get it. Cool. Like I mean, Peter was an asshole and he inadvertently caused the death of his favorite uncle.
Yeah, it
I
was brought
absolutely
up for
get it.
like a split second where he's like, well, Tony's like, says something like, what's your story? And he's like, well, it started. It's like, no time. Just shut it down. It's like,
No, that's
finally, Ben gets a break.
yeah. Like I mean, that's exactly it. Like I mean, we don't need to see Uncle Ben being shot by some burglar because Peter Parker had a splinter dildo up his ass. We get it. Like, I missed the part where that's my problem or whatever the fuck it is that he says, but still, we get it. We get it. Peter Parker had a dick moment and Uncle Ben died because of his ego.
It made
Um,
sense in the first Spider Man movie, but in every Spider Man movie since well, until Homecoming and Far From Home, where nothing. Um, it seems like they had to keep calling back to it at some point. Just like you're saying, in every Batman movie, we gotta see his parents die over and over
yeah.
again. If I see pearls falling in slow motion one more time,
Yeah, then you'll understand exactly how Batman feels whenever he sees pearls falling because he's lived that moment over and over and over and over and over in his mind. And now the difference is he just remembers it. We have to fucking watch that shit. Like, yes, we get it. He's, Batman is emo. We fully get it. He's the dark emo knight.
I'm gonna dress up in a costume and just go around Hollywood saying, "We don't need origin stories."
Well, it's like, have you ever watched that series, How It Should Have Ended?
Yes.
When they do the Spider-Man ones, it's hysterical because you have this little kid that gets on Tobey Maguire's ass when they're covering Spider-Man 3, saying, "We don't need any more monologue. We don't need it. Stop doing it." So then Spider-Man starts doing his thing. And then they touched upon, I think it was, oh God, what was it? I think they touched upon Spider-Man Homecoming. Or no, not Spider-Man Homecoming. Into the Spider-Verse. And Spider-Man starts doing this inner monologue, and now the kid, who is now, an adult, is like, "Dude, I told you, we don't need any more monologue. Knock it off." Like, we don't need a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, and that's the thing about source materials is, especially if you're adapting comic books, people think that you need to see the origin story over and over and over, and then even then, they tried, I think, with the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they were going to adapt the whole storyline of his parents, but they didn't. It's like Mark Webb didn't know what the hell he wanted to do.
It would have been.
But coming off that, though, you have other movies. I hear Twilight, actually. I can't stand that series.
I've
I
never seen
cannot
a Twilight
stand.
movie.
I just listen to Kristen Stewart for about 3 hours straight, going. That's Twilight right there. Kristen Stewart, like, scoffing for, or huffing and puffing for, 3.5 hours straight each movie. Sparkly skin, and the entire build up and final fight scene in the last Twilight movie was all just a daydream, basically. Never even happens. But
Isn't it just a Mormon allegory about marriage?
oh, I don't know. But then you have things like Battlefield Earth. That is my favorite from novelization to screenplay, just because it's so hysterically stupid. And John Travolta swore that this was going to be the next Star Wars. And it was all because it was written. The novel, I believe, was written by the guy that founded Scientology.
Mm-hmm. That's basically
Um,
the Scientology movie. That's what they believe.
that's all it is. I'm surprised that Tom Cruise wasn't running through half the damn movie. Well, I mean, Tom Cruise and John Travolta in a movie together. What a team up! John Travolta is chasing Tom Cruise in a spaceship while Tom Cruise is running through this like wasteland. That would have been the whole movie right there with the two biggest Scientologist, what do you call it? Followers, Scientology followers, or enthusiasts, or whatever you want to call it, fanatics. But it's. I read the novel. I read the novel out of sheer curiosity. First off, the movie, the novel was just really dumb. I don't know which one's worse, the movie or the novel. But the fact that I read the screenplay for the movie and compared it because I was so curious as to what might have gotten lost in translation. And that's the thing, nothing got lost in translation. You had a shitty novel and a shitty screenplay and a shitty movie, all helmed by a mediocre star. Nothing against John Travolta. He's just, like, John Travolta did everything. There's not a whole lot of acting. It's like watching Tony Danza, except like a little bit more, successful. In fact, I think Tony Danza would have been better off in a lot of movies that Tom Cruise is in because then they'd be more watchable. But
Okay, with the hot take.
yeah, I'm not a John Travolta fan. What can I say? But isn't that like Joey Lawrence?
Yeah, yeah.
Whoa!
I was reaching for John Travolta, but I missed it somewhere, probably because of anyway. Yeah, yeah. What can I say? It's Battlefield Earth. It is what it is, man. I mean, you can't. And there are people out there that live by that movie, and it is.
Oh, I know. I've got a buddy of mine that is a Scientologist. We can talk about politics. We can talk about movies. We can talk about all kinds of stuff. We cannot discuss religion because it's like talking to a multi-level marketing friend. He's always trying to rope you in. Oh, just come to one meeting with me, man. You got to try this. Like, I'm not going to join your cult, dude. Well, Christianity's a cult. I agree with you. I don't do that either. I suck at it. Like, I mean, chances are, if you're going there listening to some guy dressed in a robe talking, it's probably a cult. Sorry. And the leader of Christianity wears a bathrobe all the time when he's speaking. I mean, and a cape, a half cape,
And a big hat.
and a big hat.
Now, let's see. There are a couple of more things I want to get to before we head out of here, because we've talked a lot about adapting novels, and we even touched on adapting comic books. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and hopefully, again, you have a response. Well, we'll see. Over the years, there have been many, many adaptions of a lot of different things. A lot of them we mentioned. I don't think it's necessary to go into stage adaptions because it's basically, taking the script, putting cameras in front of it, whatever.
Okay.
But one area in particular has been very lackluster in the adaptions department, and that's video games.
Okay.
So my question to you, Brandon, why do you think video games have had such a hard time being adapted for the big screen or the small screen even?
Well, because I think that the people adapting them aren't really fans of them. They are just, a lot of them are like what Danielle said with the Hobbit series. A lot of them are just cash grabs at very best. You have to be a specific kind of fan for a lot of these films to really even be anything. I mean, look at what do you call it? Let's say Mortal Kombat, the first one. Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed
the first Mortal Kombat was actually pretty damn solid. Like, I mean, I thought they did a great job with that. Like, they, it didn't really follow the story too closely. Like, you didn't really see any of the rivalry between Scorpion and Sub-Zero. It is merely mentioned in the movie that they are in fact enemies. That's how we find out that they hate each other. Now everything else, let's see, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. That was the studio being a studio. That movie is damn near. And Danielle, it's funny. Danielle actually just posted something today in this group that you and the three of us are in, actually, about how Mortal Kombat Annihilation came out 23 years ago, something like that, 23 years ago. But that movie, it had subpar everything compared to the first one. The story just sucked. It made no sense, none whatsoever. You mix that with the idea of what do you call it? The CGI, the overly used special effects, of piss poor writing, the unrealistic dialogue, and you have an absolute shit show of a movie.
The B movie shooting style.
Yeah, there was a TV series of Mortal Kombat that came out in the 90s. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, it's a very made-for-TV feel.
No, it definitely does. And that might have been the point behind it, but it misses mark. Assassin's Creed is another great example. This is a movie that didn't need to exist, but it was made. Uwe Boll is infamous for butchering these movies. Just absolutely butchering video games in cinema. But it's one of those deals where it's just once the studio gets involved, like I'm excited for the new Mortal Kombat movie because it's made by fans. If you've ever watched Mortal Kombat Legacy on YouTube when it was,
I've seen a couple of those.
It was made by Kevin I forget what his last name is, but it was made by a guy that was a diehard Mortal Kombat fan. So with that being the case, it was actually the first season was pretty badass. All the individual stories of the characters, their origins, and everything else, making their way towards the tournament. And then you had, the second season, which dealt with them actually being at the tournament. Never got renewed for a third season, which sucked, but it was pretty solid. But that's what it comes down to. It comes down to the love of the source material. Look at Silent Hill. Silent Hill was actually a pretty solid, video game adaptation. They changed a few things. They made the lead character a woman instead of a man. And they gave this whole entire backstory. They kind of blended Silent Hill 1 and 2 into this movie. And it was actually pretty damn good. Because they had respect for the source material. And ultimately, I think that's the make or break point for any adaptation of any book or any Broadway show adapted into a movie or any video game adapted into a movie. You have to have respect for the source material. It has to be there. Because then you have things like Super Mario Brothers. It was directed by a husband and wife team who were so god awful to work with that they have not directed anything since. And I think John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins were, if I remember right, I think that they actually said they were drunk while filming almost the entire thing.
Oh yeah. It was that's what I remember most when I think it was Bob Hoskins did an interview with, I don't remember what the outlet was, but yeah, a whole lot of drinking going on.
Yeah, I think he said he took that role for his kids. And even then, like years later, when asked if he regrets any movie role, what is it? And it was Mortal Kombat. Yeah, it was Mortal Kombat. It was Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with that when it comes to any adaptation, but especially video games, because a lot of people in, say, the previous generation of filmmakers, the ones that know how to make a movie, don't always necessarily love video games. So you have now a whole new generation, and you see that with the Marvel movies especially. You're getting people that actually are in love with the material that they're working with, and the care and the patience shows in each frame, because they are personally invested in making sure that the product comes out right. Whereas somebody making a Super Mario Brothers movie that doesn't play Super Mario Brothers winds up with whatever the hell we got, because I'm here we are, many years later, decades later, and I still have no idea exactly what the Super Mario Brothers movie was supposed to be, what it was supposed to represent. It was definitely not done with care. In fact, I would say it was done very haphazardly and recklessly. It's such a shame, because that took Nintendo out of wanting to adapt anything for a very long time.
And years later, you had people like, well, what about Legend of Zelda? Like, Nintendo's like, no, fuck you, people. It's like, what about
decades of their IP? So we could have been getting decades of their IP as films and television shows. The best Mario adaptation by far has been the absurd Super Mario Brothers Super Show with Captain Lou Albano as Mario for the intros and outros, and a cartoon in between. And it's ridiculous that has to be the best representation of Mario in live action. Captain Lou, right?
Yeah,
it's just sick. Don't get me wrong, I love Captain Lou, one of the greatest wrestling managers of all time. But to think that an iconic property as Mario has that to fall back on, because I think it's better than the movie version, as much as I hate to say it. And I think as long as people continue to put properties in the hands of the people that want to do the properties justice, rather than well, as we keep saying, rather than going for a cash grab. And I mean, like, there's a Call of Duty movie in the works, right?
Yeah, I heard about that.
That can go in so many different ways. That can go sideways so quickly. And after all, it's basically just a war movie. So, are you
Yeah,
going to get
pretty
somebody
much.
that specializes in war movies, or somebody that specializes in like high concept, fast action? And sure, you can probably find someone that can do both, but it certainly does not lend itself to a property that translates well. Um, it could be very generic very quickly. Doom comes to mind quickly as something that went very generic very quick. And the iconic, character in Doom being played by The Rock. Um, Hell on Mars, essentially. And all it did was basically put the game onto film. Yeah, some people might want that, but it's hardly an adaptation that felt like any effort was put in it at all.
Well, I absolutely agree with you.
We definitely, when it comes to video game movies, need somebody that can helm these things and put substance over style. That's why I'm really looking forward to the Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg Uncharted movie, which I believe finally ramped production not too long ago. Even though the Uncharted series is very cinematic by itself as a game, having this adaptation could it could be a very cool thing. And I don't remember who's directing it, but as long as they keep the adventure on the forefront, like Indiana Jones, where it's action, it's adventure. It's not let's try to recreate the game on screen, because there's a reason why games are games and movies are movies. And one of the arguments I see a lot is you can't adapt video games into movies because video games are interactive. You get to make choices. You get to do this, yada 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 yada. But at the end of the day, a story, no matter how you're involved in it, whether you're taking part in actually helping it come about, or if you're just passively experiencing it, it's all about a character needs or wants something, and their story is how they get it or if they get it.
Yeah, and that brings me to like what we were talking about earlier with like novels and subplots and everything else, and like The Shining, and the whole point of a movie in general, as you said, is what need does the protagonist have? What the lead character in the story? What do they need to accomplish? What obstacles in each scene are they going to encounter to get them to that goal? Um, these are all things that have to be in these stories. They're not things that you can just get rid of. They are very much, things that have to be discussed and handled in a delicate manner, more so than just you know oh well, this character wants to do this. Okay, well, how is he going to do that? Oh well, this happens. Okay, well, how does he get past that? Like, that's how movies are structured. That's how these stories are structured. um, so you have these movies or you have these books rather, that have so much more to them. Like I said, having a novel and having a actual story, like, I'm sorry, having a novel and having a screenplay, two completely different beasts. You you can barely even compare the two. Um, so yeah, like that's how they're structured, and because of a lot of these movies failing to, I guess, properly structure. I'm sorry, because of these novels that don't structure that way. That's where the difference comes about. If any of that made any sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It
Yay!
and
I kind of zoned
added
out
on
while I
to
was
that,
mid sentence.
added on to that, it also goes back to what you said. It really helps when the people involved in making it are invested personally, and you get a perspective of this is what I want to see, not this is what I think they want to see.
Yep.
All right. Before we head out, one more thing when it comes to adaptions. Real simple task for us both. I want us to each come up with 3 intellectual properties, 3 IPs that have not been adapted into a movie or TV show that you want to see adapted.
Like right now.
Like right now.
Okay. So as I said earlier, I would love to see um, Steve Lestat's Punk Chicken series adapted into a adapted. I think there's a lot to it. I think that it could actually be very well like the next Forrest Gump because of how great the book was. So there's one right there.
Okay.
Number 2. There's a novel I've read back in like fucking middle school. I still love the book. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It is an absolutely beautiful story. But I'd love to see that adapted as well. It's all about a guy that takes his son on a cross country. Have you read it? Have you ever read this?
No.
Okay. It's about a guy who committed himself into a mental health asylum. They performed shock therapy on him and pretty much erased his memory. He has very loose, like faint memories of his wife and his son looking at him through like a window. That's all he remembers of them. So when he is released, his brain is pretty much fried. Only thing that he really remembered is what he knew about motorcycles and he takes his son on a cross-country motorcycle trip into the mountains, everything else, and he's comparing these life experiences with the maintenance and care that goes into a motorcycle. It sounds boring, but it is a beautiful story. And to further it, I think the author actually passed away, but when he revisited his novel, he posted an update, and his son was actually stabbed and killed. I think trying to break up a fight or something. I forget what the issue was, but he was trying to break up a fight and he was killed on his 21st birthday. The detail about what he and his wife had experienced in the time since his death. So there's that one as well. I would love to see that get turned into a novelization. Very, very, very much so. And then there was another novel that I recently read that I cannot remember the name of it. I kind of borrow books from work and return them and things of that nature. But let me just go with this book, Spook. It's a horror ghost story kind of. Actually, can we talk about like a series of novels?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. You know how they adapted scary stories to tell in the dark?
Yeah. I watched that recently.
Okay. There's another set of horror books that were made for kids that I read when I was in elementary school and into middle school, because some of these stories are actually kind of dark. Tales for the Midnight Hour.
Oh, I remember that.
I would love to see that series adapted into an actual movie, or even better, an actual series like on HBO Max or Amazon Prime, something. I would absolutely love that. Because I mean, you have some stories in there that are creepy as shit. Some kid gets stuck on, in one story, a kid gets stuck in an island with a shapeshifter that ends up killing the kid. Another one, a guy buys a gecko that starts eat like to eat the roaches in his apartment, and eventually the gecko gets so big that it starts eating him. It's a creepy series. I would love to see that come back in some form, even if it's just like an actual series. But those are my three. What about you?
Well, mine are going to run quite the gamut here, so buckle up, partner. I don't know why I said that. Anyway,
I don't
the
know
the
either.
first
That's weird.
I would like to see is an adaptation of a book called "Losing Joe's Place" by Gordon Corman.
Okay.
It's essentially the story of three teenagers. One of them has a brother, and they move into his apartment for the summer. It's a Canadian thing. So these three teens are living on their own, and hijinks ensue. Whenever I read the book, and actually, I still have the book on my bookshelf to this day. I've had to search far and wide to get a good copy of it because it is not, one of those things that's in abundance. I read it when I was a kid, and I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed reading it, and I would love to see a live action adaptation of it. It would be a very selfish thing for me. I don't think it would play very well to anybody but me, to be honest.
Okay.
So that's my first. My second is it's a Stephen King story, and I know right now people listening are like, hasn't every Stephen King story been adapted by this point? The answer is no. um, in kind of a toss up, I'd say The Stand is my quintessential Stephen King number one book. But if somebody said, do you have a 1B? It would be a collection of books called the Bachman books. It was all bound on under one binding, four books by Richard Bachman, Stephen King's pseudonym when he was first starting. And one of the stories from those books has been made into a movie, and when it comes to faithful adaptions, not done very well, and that was The Running Man.
Okay.
But also in this group of books is a story called The Long Walk, and arguably one of my favorite stories, period. And it's about this competition. It's a competition where a bunch of like 18-year-old around that age, they start walking. It's a government sanctioned event, and that the idea is to keep walking until only one person is left standing. And when you win basically whatever you want, forever.
Okay.
But the rules are, if while you're walking you drop under 4 miles per hour, you get a warning. And if you get 3, you're basically executed on the spot. So it is a story about not only physical but mental breakdown as these young men are just walking literally for their lives, and it's a completely voluntary thing too, because there can only be one winner, and the last man standing is literally the last man standing, the last man alive.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it is such a character study. I'd love to see it adapted. I'd rather see it be a mini series, so they could really, take a deep dive into who these characters are, and maybe even do more than the actual book did. But
Okay.
I am just dying for that adaptation, and from what I understand, somebody has the rights to it, but they've had the rights for like 20 years now, and just nothing's been done in it. breaks my heart every time. I think Frank Darabont actually might have the rights to it. So hopefully something will come of that soon. And finally, this might seem like a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to go the video game route and say I want to see the Red Dead Redemption universe brought to life on the screen.
Okay.
I'm not sure where to begin that at, because there are so many different angles you can take, especially between Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2, going from two completely different protagonists. So who do you start from, especially since the first game is based on, or the second game is a prequel to the first game? Where do you go? Well, I'm going to say, if you really want to start a series, and I think it would have to be like an HBO series, if you want to start this series, you have to start with Dutch putting the gang together and do like pre Red Dead Redemption 2 stuff. Have it build up into the territory that's covered in the game, and make the big events centered around some of the big events of the game, but really start out prior to that. I just want to see that universe come to life, and I think it could be a wonderful Western, something that we don't get nearly enough of anymore. Just get somebody to make me Red Dead Redemption. Those are my three top picks for what I want to see adapted.
Okay.
Now, I did have another question. I don't remember what it was right now, but we took a pretty deep dive into this whole adaption thing.
Yeah.
We did pretty well unpacking it too.
I think we did too. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. It's nice to have somebody be proud of me. Oh, that sounded weird and pathetic.
No, sweetie, I'm always proud of you.
You know what I'm proud of?
What?
Your ability to keep up with social media. Why don't you tell people how they can follow you?
People follow me?
On social media.
Like to the store?
Sometimes.
Sweet. No, you can follow me on You can follow me on what do you call it? It's Facebook, I think. Yeah, you can follow me on Facebook. You can reach me over at well, actually, just follow us over on our actual Facebook. The WADcast Facebook.com/the WADcast. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted right now. It's a pretty good way to follow us. I mean, I would assume that if you were to follow us, that's where you would want to go, our social media. Now, that being the case, you could also follow us on Instagram, Instagram.com/the WADcast. You'll notice both of our pages by the fact that we don't suck. No, I'm joking. You'll notice our pages because we have our little black logo there with white banner that says WADcast in it. And that's where you can follow us. Go to thewadcast.com. Not that there's anything that's been posted on there in a hot minute. I'm just kind of paying for that website to say we have a website. I really need to update that thing. I keep meaning to, and I keep sucking at doing it. So, what about you, Josh?
Well, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at SkidComic or at WADcastPod if you want to reach out to the show directly, or if you're a listener to any of the Semicore Studios podcast, go to @Semicore Studios, give that a follow. Go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Semicore, and like that. And just like the WADcast, you'll be able to catch the podcast live. You'll be able to join the conversation, jump in the chat, leave some comments, be a part of the conversation. We would welcome you with open hearts and open arms. If you want to learn more about Semicore Studios, you know what? SemicoreStudios.com is a thing. I also maybe don't update it as much as I need to, but all of the pertinent following information is there. You can find out all of the social media links. If you want to go directly to the pods, semicorepods.com. That's right. That is its own domain too, but it goes directly to the Spreaker page where the podcasts are posted. One quick announcement for Semicore Studios. I'm bringing back Josh's World. That's the show where I get very deep and introspective and try to figure out what the hell's wrong with me. So that's going to be coming, and I actually have a format planned for it. So hopefully you'll find that to be very interesting as the episodes start coming out there. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I know I've seen, in the chat, a lot of people come and go. And next time, don't forget to say hi. If you're listening on a delayed basis, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. Wherever you listen to the podcast, so the algorithms can pick us up and share us to the world. If you are listening live, you can be here every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And we will, again, be happy to have you join our conversation. And we'll read what you say right here on the show, and it'll be on the interwebs forever. So, Brandon, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
No, I'm good. I got nothing.
Okay, that's fair. What I'm going to do right now is, since it's on my mind, I am going to click this, and say, hey, in the show's comment section on the WADcast page, I'm posting the link to the merchandise place. So if you feel like repping the WADcast or repping Semicore Studios, by all means, check out the products available. I definitely have a few. Funny story, I ordered a jacket. Winter's coming up. I ordered a jacket, a Semicore Studios jacket. And it comes in the mail, and the first thing my oldest kid says is, I want it. I'm like, what? It's my jacket. She's like, no, it's mine now. So
that's gotta be like a thing that just happens with women at like an early age, I guess, where they start stealing people's clothes.
Oh yeah. The first clothes they steal their fathers, and now she wears her Semicore Studios jacket to school every day. And part of me is like, it's cold, I wish I had a jacket. But the other part of me is like, I'm so proud my kid wants to rep, the podcast and such. And makes me feel very warm inside, although still very cold on the outside. Let's see. So there it is. I guess there's only one thing left to do, and that's talk to you guys about what you can do. Remember, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the only people standing in the way of you and your dreams are you. That's right, you're the only one holding you back. If you have a dream to be an entertainer, do it. If you have a phone, you can shoot. If you have a microphone, you can record. If you have a dream, you can do it. But the first step is to do it. The second step is to keep doing it. And the third step, optional. Share what you do. There are plenty of people out there that follow their dreams and keep it completely to themselves, and that's okay. But don't let you stop you from doing the thing that you want to do, as long as it's not illegal. So until next time, I'm Josh. That's Brandon. This has been the WADcast, episode number 31.